Welcome to the intersection of politics and everyday life. I'm Brian Lehrer. It wasn't a political tsunami, but a blue wave of Democratic victories that did wash across parts of the country yesterday, and Mayor Bill de Blasio was happy to dive in. He easily won a second term, the first Democrat to do so since Ed Koch in 1981. This one was a landslide over Republican Nicole Malliotakis and a handful of independents. In his victory speech, the mayor said he wanted to make New York the fairest city in the country. Not as catchy a slogan as A Tale of Two Cities, perhaps, but he'd make it fair with his familiar list of goals, including more affordable housing and pre-K for 3-year-olds. And precisely 1 year after the 2016 presidential election, our mayor seemed to be thinking nationally. He called the Trump administration un-American and pointed to Democratic victories elsewhere.
America got a little fairer tonight. America got a little bluer tonight. Let's cheer so they can hear us in New Jersey. Let's cheer so they can hear us in Virginia.
Why all the cheering? In New Jersey, Democrat Phil Murphy easily defeated Republican Lieutenant Governor Kim Guadagno, so Murphy will succeed Governor Chris Christie. In Virginia, Democrat Ralph Northam handily took the governorship, beating by almost 9 percentage points Ed Gillespie, who played the Trump card on immigration and race. Also significant, as many as 15 Virginia House of Delegates seats were flipped by Democrats, mostly by women. Locally, there also seem to be signs of a Trump backlash in the suburbs. So is this a new beginning for Democrats? What's it mean for the midterm 2018 elections? Much to discuss, including the rejection of a constitutional convention here in New York State. On our panel today, political scientist Ester Fuchs, director of the Urban and Social Policy Program at Columbia University, newly re-elected City Councilman Antonio Reynoso. His 34th district ranges from Bushwick and Williamsburg in Brooklyn to Ridgewood in Queens. And for the New Jersey perspective, political reporter Matt Arco, who contributes to the Star-Ledger and NJ.com. Welcome to all of you.
Thank you for having us.
Esther, justifiable optimism for Democrats around the country today?
Yes, I mean, I think it would really be hard for anybody to interpret this outcome in Jersey and Virginia, in Washington State, and in Maine. There was a wonderful proposition on the ballot to expand Medicaid in Maine. It would be hard not to interpret this as a rejection of the Trump agenda. Now, having said that, should the Democrats be euphoric and, start dancing in the streets? Absolutely not, because what we learned so much from the last election, I hope, but what we learned is that you cannot just simply run an anti-Trump campaign. Democrats have to have a positive agenda, and that has yet to be articulated.
Matt, in New Jersey, looking at 2018, for people in New York who don't know, New Jersey has a split congressional delegation, right? A number of Democrats, a number of Republicans.
In the House, yeah.
In the House. There are some pretty endangered New Jersey House Republicans all of a sudden, aren't there?
Yeah, so look, one thing that I would say is that New Jersey didn't have the same effect, the anti-Trump effect, as Virginia did overall. But in specifically those districts, that's where we sort of saw this Trump effect, where suburban college-educated voters got out and then had some very close calls to districts that we thought were just safe Republicans. So you had people that were in the state Senate that were there for a while who were looking down the barrel of almost a defeat, and it came out of almost nowhere. So look, on the larger scale, we're dealing with an issue in New Jersey with Chris Christie, the outgoing governor, who we all know, I think everybody in New York should know, is pretty unpopular. And so we have larger issues in New Jersey. So the overall outcome wasn't surprising, but it was these small pockets of suburban voters that really kind of took reporters and voters alike by surprise.
I saw in the exit polls Christie's popularity approval rating among people who actually voted in New Jersey yesterday was 19%.
And can I just add that it was Bob Menendez, U.S. Senator Bob Menendez, who's currently on trial for criminal charges, I think was 30, somewhere in the 30s, maybe 33 or 35%.
and so, Trump was at 31% in the exit polls. So even Donald Trump is 12 points more popular than Chris Christie in New Jersey. Councilman, is New York just exempt from this whole thing because we're so obviously blue and only Democrats were really competitive yesterday, that the whole thing is kind of happening outside our purview?
I don't think so, not necessarily. I want to say is how big de Blasio won in almost all the boroughs outside of Staten Island, winning by almost 80%. It was just a handed victory. And I think it speaks to the fact that the progressive politics does work. I don't think it's necessarily just about no challengers, right? I want to be clear that if de Blasio was weak or vulnerable, that there might have been some Democratic challengers that might have wanted to go against him. And at this point, looking in 4 years, maybe folks saw that that's a better opportunity to take on an open seat as opposed to challenging de Blasio now. But I just want to say, you know, to see that people, there was a poll in New York, one that spoke about 13% was the highest, the highest polled issue, and I think it was a crime in the city of New York. That these hot button issues that everyone cries about, that thinks de Blasio is doing a terrible job in, were almost non-issues when it came to his election, and that maybe the perception on the inside isn't exactly how people are feeling on the streets.
Malliotakis was gracious in defeat in her concession speech yesterday, but did say the city was managed by a dishonest man. Let's hear the emotional end of Malliotakis' remarks last night.
I've traveled the whole world in just these 5 boroughs, and it has been an honor of a lifetime. And you have my word that I will continue to fight for the taxpayers of this city. I will continue to fight for those of you who get up each and every day and go to work and pay taxes at the end of the year and want responsible government, that want integrity at City Hall, and that want to get the city services that you deserve. Thank you so much for coming out tonight, and I look forward to continuing to work with all of you to make New York City, the city that I was born in, the city that I grew up in, the city that my parents came to as immigrants, a beacon of opportunity and hope for all. Thank you so much.
Esther, your reaction, and I think you wanted to disagree with something Antonio.
Yeah, just a little bit, I would say, because I think the case of de Blasio is just a little bit more complex. It's really clear New York is a progressive city. We vote for progressive Democrats and Republicans. So here was, in many ways, the weakest possible Republican challenger, because it's a woman who came out, you know, against DACA and was, you know, against the idea that we should be a sanctuary city. She's not a pro-choice woman. Any mayoral candidate who's run on the Republican line, starting with John Lindsay winning, we could probably go back to LaGuardia, but whether it was Lindsay, Giuliani, even Bloomberg, who was a Democrat before he became Republican, they were all liberal on social issues. I use the word liberal, I don't need to use the word progressive.
And we should disclose that you were a Bloomberg advisor in his first term?
That's right. And in fact, somebody said to me when I started that process, you know, and they said he's going to run Republican, and I was sort of horrified, and they said, well, he was a Democrat 5 minutes ago. So this is the story of the Republican challengers in New York. And yet we had a 22% turnout, which was lower than the turnout in the last mayoral election that he ran. And Nicole Malliotakis received a larger percentage of the vote than Joe Lhota did, who was actually more qualified, I would say, objectively to be mayor than she was, and just in terms of experience. And so it's clear to me that there was a protest vote out there against Bill de Blasio, but no one was willing to vote against him on progressive and social issues.
Go ahead.
So I want to disagree, right? I think that this protest vote came almost exclusively from Staten Island. Again, I think it was 79% in Brooklyn, 79% in Manhattan, right? And progressive Manhattan, where a lot of folks thought that the progressives there would not necessarily be aligned with him for his lack of movement on, let's say, like police reform and other issues. That just didn't happen. This outcry that de Blasio is just unsatisfactory or boring to the city of New York just didn't play out last night. And I think it speaks to the fact that, again, the conversations happening outside of City Hall and outside of the circles of folks that talk about this all the time is that he is well liked. And remember, they could have done it in the Democratic primary.
There's
where
really nothing that indicates that he is well liked. None of the poll data shows that he is well liked.
Well, they're
does
satisfied,
he have the policy issues that New Yorkers care about? Yes, of course he does. But that's a different point than saying that he is well liked or people in general think he is a good manager or is doing the job well. You can win because, the fight has to be in the primary in New York by and large.
Well, who cares about, quote, likability if they do agree with him on policies and feel well served by his policies?
Well, that's what happens in the end. I think in the end, most people who are going to turn out, which was a kind of extraordinary low turnout, it's a scary low turnout as far as I'm concerned, in the end are going to say, look, likability is not the issue. We need somebody who's a strong progressive in this environment. He's the only person who benefits from Trump's victory. This man is one of the luckiest men in politics. Each time he's run, it's evaporated around him. And he's an excellent politician, don't get me wrong. That doesn't mean you're an excellent manager.
Now, let's take another example from yesterday's election of going from liked to disliked. Governor Chris Christie got to vote for who his successor would be on Election Day yesterday, and even as he did, he had one more, shall we say, interesting confrontation with a voter in his hometown of Mendham.
Question to you is, why didn't you merge the borough and the town?
Because I can't.
In 8 years.
Well, as governor, I can't.
So why didn't you?
I can't.
Well, then why
I don't have the authority to do it. Well, you know what? You can listen. Go in and vote. Go in and vote for whatever you want. I never said I was going to merge the two towns. I understand. You're so frustrated. You know what? The easiest thing in the world is to stand where you stand and stand on the sidelines and critique. And well, you're not. But you're the one here doing the critiquing. So you know what? You want to merge. You live in Mendham Township. You want to merge Mendham Township and Mendham Borough. Run for the township committee. Run for the township committee in Mendham Township and be the voice to do it. No, I know, because that's too hard. It's easier to sit here. It's easier to sit here and complain. It's easier.
And I don't have the money like you.
Yeah. Oh, really? I'm sure. Easier to sit here and complain. But you know what? That's the joy of public service. It's serving folks. It's serving folks. Yeah, it's serving folks like you that is really such a unique joy. It really is. You're fabulous.
To think, Matt Arco, that 4 years ago, on the day of his reelection, people thought he was so well liked, he was the front runner for the Republican nomination for president.
He was not only so well liked that he was a front runner, but New Jerseyans actually wanted him to run for president. They were actually excited. They said, hey, we're going to have a Jersey guy up on the national stage. And then Bridgegate happened, and then everything, it was a precipitous fall from there on out. I have to say, I've been covering the guy daily for 5 years. I mean, I'm going to miss these interactions. When do you get to have a politician to just get into something like that?
He should have gotten that sports talk job he applied for. He would have been perfect.
Yeah, I mean, look, the irony of it all is that this may have been a little bit of an aggressive interaction, but these are the type of things that rocketed him to the national stage. Years ago, him yelling at somebody at a town hall is what gave him national notoriety in the Republican Party.
Is Mayor de Blasio the next one to fall from grace among his voters because he spends too much time laying the groundwork for a possible run for president?
We're going to see his management style really show here in the next 4 years. Can he do both, let's say? And I'm not necessarily agreeing that he's going to run for president, but I do think we're going to see him take on issues related to education outside of 3K. We still have this housing issue that needs to be taken care of and this homelessness issue that we have to address. So there's a lot of work to be done in the next 4 years. What I do know is that he can be a lot more aggressive and more, I guess, defiant in the way he addresses issues here in the city of New York because he's lame duck like we all are. And I'm looking forward to the next 4 years as a progressive council member to be able to push a lot of these issues that otherwise wouldn't be able to be pushed. So this management conversation about de Blasio, we'll find out in the next 4 years.
Matt, before we leave the topic of Christie in national office, as we sit here and speak, a jury is out deciding the fate of Democratic Senator Bob Menendez, who just went through a corruption trial. If he has to leave office, and even if he's convicted, it doesn't mean under the law that he necessarily has to leave office, but if he does have to leave office, and it takes place while Christie is still the governor, he can appoint the successor, presumably a Republican, and some people say maybe himself.
No.
No?
I mean, no. He has been pretty on the record about, I think he has threatened suicide twice and saying he would rather kill himself than be in the U.S. Senate. The governor, Christie, I don't think he wants to be in the U.S. Senate. His political career in New Jersey, unless he were going to run for governor again in 4 years, which he's not going to do, but I mean, he's out of politics in New Jersey. You know, maybe something happens in Washington in 4, 8, whatever years, but no, he's not going to be in the Senate.
So, Esther, is there a national politics future for Bill de Blasio, potentially?
Well, you know, clearly he hasn't taken political science 101 because there's something out there called Sayre's Law about New York City mayors. New York City mayors do not excel when they run for higher office. In fact, they never win at all. I mean, Lindsay tried to run for the presidency. Giuliani tried to run, so this is recent history. And of course, you know, in the last round when de Blasio tried to be that voice in the national politics, he couldn't even get the candidates to show up for his debate, his progressive debate in Iowa. So I don't believe that this is particularly his personal problem. I just think that structurally it's not a good jump from the New York City stage, which is fairly sui generis in this country's politics, to national politics. And you know, so he's going to try, there's no question, because you know, he's got to do where, you know, his heart takes him. And maybe he'll be a good spokesperson. I think he's you know, he gives great speeches when he's really engaged. And he's very inspirational. And I think that's actually something important that we need. And certainly the Democratic Party needs that on the national stage. So he could be very influential, but I don't think he can win a national
you
campaign.
have to be pretty special to be a Northeast politician to play on the national stage. I mean, look, before Bridgegate, that's why Christie, he was something very different. And, you know, being in the Northeast.
One of the things that he did was, during Sandy, he hugged Obama.
Right. Well, you know, and that did hurt him. I mean, when I was out with him on the campaign trail in Iowa, that consistently came up. So,
well, it's harder for a Republican than it is for a Democrat now. Right. I mean, the Democratic Party's moved more to the left, which means that New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts can have more of a say in the national politics.
Councilman, you're on the Transportation Committee.
Yes.
And what to do about the subways and what the city's role in this has been a conundrum for de Blasio. It's been the source of one of his fights ongoing with Governor Cuomo. Yes. Here's what he had to say about that in his victory speech last night.
And let's do something that's long overdue. Let's fix our subways. I just want to ask this room of very knowledgeable New Yorkers, do you think we need more money to fix the subways? Do you think the millionaires and billionaires have some money to spare? How about a millionaire's tax to fix the New York City subways? And while we're at it, that tax can allow us to give half-price Metro cards to low-income New Yorkers so they can experience opportunity in this city as well.
Problem, Councilman, is your body, City Council, doesn't get to vote on the millionaire's tax.
Yes, you are right.
That would have to be the state legislature. So there it's really, really unlikely, right?
Yes, absolutely. It's unlikely. Maybe we send a message up to Albany saying we support it. Outside of that, I don't think we have much influence. And I don't necessarily think it's the only solution to how we deal with our transportation problem. What I do think it's a state issue. We have a responsibility here to make sure it runs and it's maintained, especially for many poor, black and brown, individuals that are going to work and to and from work in the city of New York. Congestion pricing is a real conversation as well. It shouldn't only be the millionaire's tax. We should think creatively and thoughtfully of many options that the city has to address this issue. It is a real issue that I think the mayor and this administration so far has fallen extremely short on.
When you say many options other than congestion pricing, you mean just to fund subway improvements?
Yes, absolutely. I think that if we push a congestion pricing plan, it should be targeted mostly or specifically or exclusively to transportation projects alone in congestion pricing. We shouldn't be negotiating for more schools and more parks through this process. It should be to maintain this extremely important piece of infrastructure in the city of New York that we rely on every single day.
Now, it's ironic, Esther, and I know you would say the same thing, that if New York City wanted to impose a tax on people earning $1 million or more a year just within the city of New York, we do not have that power. Albany has that power. Now, you were one of the most prominent proponents of the Constitutional Convention referendum on the ballot. And
that's a sad statement if I was.
I believe that getting more home rule for New York and other localities, more independence from Albany on things that only affect us, was one of the goals, right?
Yes. So it is sad that the Constitutional Convention did not pass because it was an opportunity to make change in a way that we're never going to see from the state legislature. I tend not to like to circumvent standard operating procedures like representative government, except when you realize there's a structural problem. And what I found fascinating about the Constitutional Convention provision in the state constitution, it's every 20 years, bring it to the people again, and basically let's create a different legislative structure. They were anticipating essentially the situation we're in right now, which is a state legislature that refuses to pass campaign finance law, refuses to deal with the issue of home rule, refuses to do anti-corruption legislation, and refuses to make it easier for people to vote so we don't look like a southern state when it comes
to why did it lose
voter suppression?
4-1, 80%.
Yeah.
No vote. It couldn't have just been, the teachers union, which was the lead opponent, turning out all its members.
Well, here's the situation is it was a scare tactic campaign, and in fact what was fascinating to me is a disinformation campaign coming from so-called progressives. And the hypocrisy here is partly what also disturbs me. Why would the unions, the progressive electeds, not support a constitutional convention which gives power to the people? Is all we hear from them all the time is, well, participatory budgeting, we want to engage the public more. This is a real opportunity to engage the public more, and they opposed it. It's all about keeping power of the status quo.
I don't want to relitigate this too much because this is
over
for the next 20 years, because the next time the people can vote on a constitutional convention is 20 years from now. But were you a no on this?
I was a no, and I was part of the progressive establishment here. Let's be honest. Special interest is a real issue and a real problem, and it is.
Koch brothers money, Mercer money,
any type of money.
But it's not real. Who's a special interest?
So
the unions are a special interest. Come on, give me a break.
The independent Democrats
You're a special interest.
The independent Democrats are a perfect example of a group of elected officials that the people can't.
They are your Democrats. Why can't you control them? That's unbelievable.
Well,
to me.
I guess that's part of the argument that we're having. That at the end of the day,
that's sort of the point.
Are not able to remove the IDC at this moment.
Not the people, the electeds. It's the electeds who have to remove them.
But you want to give the power to the people. The people have the power to remove those. Have the power to remove them.
To bring in new people. They are supported by the political parties. There's a deal with the Republicans. Why did the Republicans and Democrats support it?
By the voters.
Why did
that's going to be very difficult to do.
Why did the Republicans and Democrats parties both opposed the convention. Why did every union and all of the real estate interests oppose it? Because they are so happy with the status quo.
I think there's opportunities through legislative changes that we can also come.
It had to go on a proposition. The public would have had to vote on it in a 7-to-1 registered Democratic city. No way Koch brothers have an impact on elections in New York.
So, Matt, I'm sure you're glad that New Jersey doesn't have these kinds of problems.
Oh, come on. Our constitutional amendments, we just do one by one instead of just doing the whole Constitution all over at once. Yes.
Can I ask you about a particular race in New Jersey? It was a state Senate race that I've read, I'm not sure who wrote this, but in perhaps the biggest upset of the night, former Monmouth County Democratic Chair Vin Gopal unseated veteran Republican State Senator Jennifer Beck, that's on the Jersey Shore. Did that indicate something larger?
It didn't, in the sense that that district was redrawn about 9 years ago. So it was more Democratic leaning. So we figured around this time that it would be competitive. And Jennifer Beck, the senator that lost her seat, was always kind of straddling the fence with legislation, and she had a couple of missteps in the way that she voted. I would say that the bigger issue is that we have another legislative district in South Jersey that was the most expensive legislative race in all state history, because you had the New Jersey Education Association going after the state's most powerful Democrat, because he ran
Steve Sweeney, the head of the state Senate, versus the teachers union,
right?
Because he was cracking down on pensions with Governor Christie?
Basically, well, pensions with Governor Christie, but there was also an issue where they wanted to put on a constitutional amendment that the state would have to be required to fulfill its pension obligation. And the fiscal hawk in him, even though he's a Democrat, said that, hey, that's a little bit too irresponsible, we can't do that. So they went after him. With everything they had. I mean, we were talking here, I think, we'll see what the latest numbers are, but they backed a pro-Trump Republican to the tune of like $6 million at least, so that the powerful people behind Steve Sweeney, which is usually a safe district, and a district that he doesn't need to pour a lot of money into, they poured back millions of dollars into his race. So that was money that would normally go to other parts of the state. So when I talked at the beginning of the program about some of these closer elections, you have other Democrats in the legislature saying, wait a minute, you know, the NJEA just sucked resources out of us that we could have put to other areas.
Very briefly, Phil Murphy has a Democratic legislature. Cuomo does not have an all-Democratic legislature in Albany, so Phil Murphy could, in theory, get things to sail through.
Could in theory, but
legalization of recreational marijuana is one of his things.
Yes. That's a tougher vote because not all Democrats are on board with that, but legalization of marijuana, we also could do $15 minimum wage. But in New Jersey's history, when you have a Democratic governor and a Democratic legislature, there's a lot of infighting going on, and
a millionaire's tax.
A millionaire's tax as well.
In New Jersey, too.
That we can expect because it has the support of the state legislature in the past.
And Esther, last word, 2018 in New York State, what are we looking at? Upstate congressional races?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think very soon that state Senate's going to flip and we're going to get a Democratic-controlled state Senate. And then it's going to be very hard for a governor and a legislature not to really deliver on their promises to the people of New York State.
All right, to be continued. Thank you all very much for joining us after Election Day 2017. At least one of those, it wasn't one of those where you up till the middle of the night.
Yeah. No,
for
right.
the results. So thanks for coming in today, even on a full night's sleep. And that's our program for today. We are here each week, midweek at this hour, at the intersection of city politics and everyday life. Be careful to look both ways. I'm Brian Lehrer. Thanks for watching.